Alright guys, Kremp again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. It's no secret that Shotzzy absolutely loves Black Ops 6 so far. The movement definitely seems catered to his playstyle, but according to what one of the top developers at Trek has to say, Dashy may well be rather in tune with this game as well. Black Ops 4 Dashy has been hailed for many years now as one of the best versions of any player that we have ever seen. One of the top developers mentions that this game may well have features that Black Ops 4 Dashy really rather liked back in the day. What does this mean for the OpTic Texas team, especially if Dashy might well change his playstyle to more so what he had back then, if some of these features actually arrive into the title? Very much intrigued your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Some cool stuff to go through. First of all, yesterday they did once again this kind of like OpTic Rangers collaboration, right? The Texas Rangers and all this. Here's the, of course, the COD Champs trophy. I don't know if this used to be the thing with the CWL World Championship trophy as it was back in the day, but some trophies you get to keep and some trophies you don't, right? So this is what the guys are up to as always. I thought was kind of cool, but you know, some trophies, there is one trophy and every single year there is a new name or team name or individual name, whatever it is, stamped onto that trophy, and that player or team can keep that trophy for a year and then it goes back to the league basically, and then they will give it out to the next team for the next year. I think that maybe was how it was in the CWL days. I don't know if there was multiple, maybe there was multiple World Championship trophies. There probably was, to be fair, but sometimes that's not how it is. Pretty sure in the CDL it is just, you know, a trophy for each year's World Championship, which probably makes more sense. I don't know, you can debate the merits of having one single trophy which lasts the test of time, which, you know, people get to keep for a year, basically, before another team potentially wins and you try and retain it. But, you know, here's Shotzzy and Ken at the Rangers game yesterday. I thought it was pretty cool, and this was that kind of behind-the-scenes shot we saw earlier with the championship trophies that both respective teams won this season, and, you know, here's another pretty good one. So it was cool to see anyway. I know they do this type of collaboration stuff every so often, and you know, always good to see. Now, Black Ops 6, we're going to talk a fair bit about that going forward. I do want to mention a few things on the state of the game compared to how we would like it to be going forwards. Let's not forget, Black Ops Cold War was coming out a few years ago at this point, probably the best game we've had in the CDL era so far. There's been lots of talk, even Parasite said he reckons the Cold War beta was better and more polished in some respects than this one was, which is a little bit concerning, just because Cold War was rushed in many respects. This game has been, you know, ready for a very long time. Hopefully when the real game comes out, it's good. I mean, look, it's good. The main problems for me are the maps. If we were playing this game, Black Ops 6, on good maps, I think the beta would be far better than it is. They've added a couple of things, they've added a couple of game modes, but this was just looking back really at the Cold War maps, the ones that it launched with, and also let's not forget, this game is coming out with 16 maps. So, you know, I'm still hopeful, right? But looking back at the Cold War maps that came up with the game, I mean, Armada, let's not talk about that. Cartel was pretty terrible. I think they tried to play this very early days for hardpoints, but there was that big tall like building you could get up, like the Overlook Tower or something, that made it kind of uncompetitive. Checkmate was, yeah, it was okay. It was a decent competitive map in the end. Crossroads Strike I actually really quite enjoyed, as the Crossroads Strike, of course, was the smaller version. Garrison was also okay. Miami was, honestly, low-key, Miami I think gets more hate than it deserved for Search and Destroy. Probably a bit of a hot take for me in COD history, but I don't think that map was as bad as people say that it was. But of course, it was only viable for Search anyway. It's not like it was a good map. It was just one of those maps that I thought actually did kind of work for Search, but some teams understandably didn't like it. Moscow was good, I would say potentially very good. I wasn't as big of a fan of that map as many people were, but it was still a pretty good map. Satellite, not worth talking about, of course, Nuketown. And then we had the throwback maps, right? Express came in, Raid came in, Standoff eventually came in as well. The Pines was obviously never going to be viable for competitive. So looking at the Cold War maps, given what it launched with in the beta, I mean, like quite a few, like Cartel, for example, Armada, was that not in the beta and stuff like this? And Satellite was definitely in the beta. So like those maps that they put in the beta were actually not anywhere near the best maps in the game, and I'm kind of hoping that that's the same thing that's happening right now with Black Ops 6, because sometimes, and maybe usually, they'll put the better maps in the beta, because then it's more likely that people will get the real game right if they have a better experience in the beta, but I'm not necessarily sure that always applies, and you know, in this case maybe not. Now, Ghost of Hope actually talks about that lots of the maps are actually very small, which I don't mind. I mean, you know, small maps can work, especially for 4 versus 4, it's definitely possible. Does mean they're fast-paced, but apparently Treyarch confirms to Charlie Intel at COD Next that all of the maps, all 16, are going to be small or medium size, which I think is fine. I mean, big maps have a lower likelihood of getting into competitive play because, you know, maybe for Search and Destroy they can work, but largely a map like Arklov Peak, for example, back in Modern Warfare 19, if that map was smaller, it genuinely could have worked for Hardpoint, I think. But it worked for Search because, you know, it doesn't matter about all the massive space in spawn for no reason if you just got a couple of bomb sites to go to. But for the other modes, it didn't really work, right? So, as Ghosty says, Rewind, Scud is, you know, small to medium. Skyline is probably small to medium. Derelict, I guess you'd say, is probably small to medium as well. Babylon, he says, is small. And, you know, as Ghosty says, I don't want large. I just want them to be kind of medium maps. There's already enough small maps already in Core 6v6, which I guess is fair enough, right? And for competitive play, these maps are probably, I think Skyline is probably an okay size for competitive, but any smaller, it can get a little bit cramped, I would say, and bigger is okay, but Skyline is about right, I would say, for how big a map you'd want it to be. But there's definitely a couple of things that, you know, we're hoping might be better when the full game launches, but of course there's another weekend of beta coming up next weekend as well. Let's talk though about, well, this duo, Kenny and Dashy, and actually there's quite a bit to say on this duo, really, and Octane's in the reply saying, hang on, that's my duo, you know what I'm saying? Like, what do you mean that's your duo, right? Do you guys remember this? Was it aBeZy or was it Hook or whatever who got the ninja defuse, and then Dashy and Kenny came out the corner and were like, hang on a second, because Kenny thought he had the cross, Dashy thought he had the other cross, but it clearly wasn't the case, of course. So that was a funny moment of the season, no doubt about it. What a duo. But this season they played in a very interesting way compared to how, like, you might have expected them as a duo to operate if you, let's say you watched Black Ops 4, you went into a coma, you came back today and you saw Kenny and Dashy as a duo, you might well expect, especially Dashy, to have a rather different playstyle to what he actually has today. And that's why there are some questions on the way this new game is going to play, and potentially therefore the way that Dashy decides to operate as a result. Because Dashy says yesterday to Matt Scronce, of course one of the top developers at Treyarch, what are the odds we get a Maddox-like gun in the full game? So the Maddox was a weapon from Black Ops 4, very fast, let's say, and a very agile assault rifle weapon. It was effectively the flex gun of the time, although flexes didn't really exist. Like, back then, it was, you had your ICR players, you had your flex players, who basically used the Maddox, your Maddox players, and then you had your SMGs, who were on the Sorg for the season. So the Maddox was a full auto gun, not too dissimilar to the K-Bar in some ways from Infinite Warfare, if you guys remember that gun as well. But yeah, the Maddox, super agile, nimble weapon that operated as really a hybrid in some ways between an AR and an SMG. It had a bit of recoil, but you could control it at a longer range, killed in like 5-6 bullets, and it was just a phenomenal weapon, there's no doubt. Very fun to use, and it was, of course, Dashy's favourite weapon at the time. Of course, Attacked is in the replies, being like, real talk, right? And then Matt Scronce himself replies and says, you're trying to throw shoulders and spam L2 again, which was how it was back then, because if you guys remember the meta with the Maddox, it wasn't really the case with the other weapons, but with Black Ops 4, the meta was, if you could hold left trigger, you could spam it and just basically go back and forth, constantly spamming L2, and it would allow you to move faster and strafe faster while still remaining very accurate when you did decide to actually want to shoot. It was the meta, it was a bit of a funky meta, but it was the meta. Dashy, of course, one of the best at using it. And obviously, the throwing shoulders was a big feature of Black Ops 4 because of the high health and the stim shot and all that type of stuff. So, this raises the questions, because Matt Scronce is replying to this. You don't imagine that he would reply if they're not at least thinking about potentially putting something like this in a game, because he even said yesterday, we talked about how with Crim 6 he was just saying, look, we're trying to make a burst gun a meta again, a potential meta weapon like we had back in the day, let's say Black Ops 3 for example, when there were so many guns that were potentially viable in the meta. And I think that's Treyarch's plan, to have loads of weapons that are potentially viable, and Matt Scronce seems to be implying that, yeah, a Maddox type gun or a weapon that you can maybe bring the L2 spam back with could potentially be on the cards. So anyone that watched Black Ops 4 knows Dashy was pretty good at this game, and in hindsight, even how many great years Dashy has had, you know, it might well be his best year ever. I mean, still, like, the numbers speak for themselves on that Black Ops 4 year, was the MVP of that Vegas event right at the start of the season, and I even just found this up real quick, I guess, to play in the background, which is Dashy highlights from the Black Ops 4 season, and of course the Tempest. Like, we're not getting specialists back and stuff like that, it is is what it is. But, you know, with the Maddox in hand, I guess we can just try and find some Maddox highlights, I guess, here real quick, because that's kind of what we were talking about, really. But this was the Maddox, right? If you guys are unfamiliar, here's a game they played at pool play at some point against Enigma 6. And, you know, one of the best weapons ever. Dashy is certainly on board with this. But at the time, you guys will well know, Dashy was a rather different player to what he is today. Not in terms of, like, the skill level and all that type of stuff. More so just in terms of the playstyle, right? Because back then, Dashy was, as you guys can tell from these clips largely, and also by the numbers that he was dropping in terms of engagement and kills, an incredibly fast-paced player. That's how he operated, and that's why he was considered so impactful at the time. He stayed in that playstyle in many ways over a large part of his career, but over the last couple of years, there's definitely been a move from Dashy, and understandably so, towards being more of an objective-minded player, and basically just doing what it takes for the team to win. You know, there have been a few years, let's say even the Vanguard season, when people said, oh, well, you know, Dashy's playing for kills, the kills aren't being so impactful and this type of stuff. Similar criticisms raised at a guy like Cellium, shall we say, over the last couple of years. Dashy's numbers, though, over the last 2 seasons or so, have gone from being on that level. It's just all 10 best clips, is it not? Surely we're going to get some Maddox at some point. Yeah, here we go. This is one other example. But, look, he's gone to a more OBJ-style role because that's what the team required, right? They now have Shotzzy, they have Pred, they have Kenny, who's another fast AR, and Dashy, I think, is... Well, it's interesting for Dashy because I don't imagine he's unhappy with what he's done. He's definitely slowed his gameplay down from what we see here a lot since watching Black Ops 4, and even the couple of years after that as well. It was absolutely a very similar story as well. And now he's a much slower player, would have been the ICR player, right? Back in the Black Ops 4 days, for example. And nonetheless, he's getting all the hill time, doing the damage for the team. And Kenny, as the faster AR player of the two, is the one being, you know, you can argue the impact or whatever you want to say on the map. But if a Maddox weapon is coming back into the game, which potentially it will be, then of course you've got to wonder whether Dashy would want to take over that type of role, because Kenny has also been a main AR as well. Like, he's also been a main for that Los Angeles Thieves team in the Cold War season, ran the Krig to good effect, of course. But of course, Dashy is typically going to be your main, and Kenny's typically going to be your kind of slightly faster flex player, right? But let's not forget, back in Black Ops 4, where there were a fair few events, but there weren't like that many events in the grand scheme of things. Dashy had 5 events with a 1.2 or above, which is pretty absurd. I mean, in the modern era, there's only, I mean, modern era is kind of difficult to define where that is, but let's say from Black Ops 4 and onwards, the only one that's, you know, come close to that really is, okay, MW19 with Octane, sure, but there were loads of home series in that game, and then Cellium in Vanguard, but apart from that, really, it's been Dashy with one of the most impressive seasons ever on that game. So that's kind of the question to you guys, right? If this happens, and there's a Maddox type gun in the game, and maybe the L2 spam meta comes back again, Dashy will want to play in a style that accommodates for that, and he certainly could. But that's not been required. I mean, this is when they won Major 3, and Dashy's damage and, let's say, in hardpoint and kills per 10 minutes in hardpoint is lower than what Kenny delivers, and that was certainly the trend through the season. But in terms of hill time, he was effectively 99 for the majority of the year in both hardpoint and control, and that's fine, and that's worked for OpTic, and you don't necessarily want to change your winning formula. But at the same time, if Dashy feels like he's going to be more impactful, playing in a more aggressive way on a game that can accommodate for that, certainly with the Omni movement in play, they might have to think about OpTic, whether Dashy stays in the kind of slow AR insight role that he's been in now for this season, or whether they think about something else. But I think regardless, it's kind of a good sign for OpTic, because Dashy seems to be pretty excited about the possibility of what this is going to mean for himself and potentially his playstyle. And of course, it's not like Shotzzy's going to be unhappy with the way the movement works in this game either, as we've seen most certainly over the last several days. So very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.